is our GPS compass controlled autonomous sailboat. So the purpose of this is that we are going to be able to communicate to our sailboat from onshore. So what we'll do is we'll transmit GPS coordinates, latitude and longitude, through Zigbee XB units right here. And so the computer that is attached to a similar device will be able to transmit coordinates to the sailboat. And the sailboat will then be able to, based off of various sensors that are connected to it, will be able to determine the direction that it needs to head. And so this is done through this diagram over here. We can see the connections that happen. So we have our laptop with connected to Zigbee that transmits over to the Zigbee. That's connected to our Raspberry Pi unit that we're using. You can also see on top that there is a compass attached to the Raspberry Pi, and so this will give it the orientation that it needs to know. And it also has a GPS dongle that is connected to it, which will give the current location, and will also be able to, when we input the GPS coordinates, we'll be able to calculate the angle or the direction angle that it needs to head in order to get to the destination location. We also have servo controllers attached to it. There's 3 servo controllers that we used. One is for the rudder of the sailboat, one is for the sails, and then one is used for our wind sensor. Now this one is a little bit more complicated. The servo motor that is attached to the wind sensor allows it to get a full spectrum of analysis, which Amanda will go into.
The wind sensor data was actually really interesting to try and gather. The device that we had, which is right here, is technically a wind sensor, but we discovered that all it really does is tell you how fast the wind is going, not really what direction that it's coming from, which doesn't do us a lot of good for our sailboat. So what we did is we covered part of the wind sensor with some tape, and then hooked it up to a servo motor and did a servo sweep, and then we gathered data as it did that. And we found that depending on the direction that the wind was coming from, it would give a certain curve with the data. And then we made some best fit curve equations using Excel, and then plugged those points into our Python code, and then as we did the servo sweep real time, we just compared our data against that to figure out what direction the wind was coming from. We were generally successfully able to tell the difference between the front, back, or one of the sides of the sailboat about at least 80% of the time. So that was exciting. And then we discovered that was actually kind of handy because whether the wind is coming from the right or left of the sailboat, it doesn't really matter because you do the same thing with the sails regardless. One of the things that you could do with a sailboat like this is put it out in a body of water and have it gathering environmental data like the pollution in the water. And it wouldn't need a lot of energy like gas, like a normal boat would need, because it can just move based on the wind and harvesting that wind in the sails. All you would really need is the energy to control the system, and that you could get from a solar panel battery.
Alright, some of the challenges that we had to overcome in making this sailboat were, first of all, when we initially tried to test the boat, put it in the water and it just wanted to tip over, so it would not float. That might be due to the weight that was actually in the keel needing to be significantly higher than it was. Another obstacle we had to overcome was working with the GPS unit. A lot of the data that we were getting from it originally wasn't in the right format that we were expecting, and so we had to convert that format, and actually didn't understand the data that it was giving us until we did some research and discovered that the format was different than what we were expecting. Another one was having to do with power. We're not sure if, with all the sensors that we have attached to a Raspberry Pi and the batteries that we're using 2 batteries, and we're not sure if it's giving enough power, as sometimes the sensors sporadically work on and off. So as far as power consumption, that would be another issue that if someone were to continue doing this project, they would have to look into that in the future. Overall, we had a really successful run with this sailboat, and we were able to learn a lot about how a sailboat works, and we're able to get the basics set up to where the sailboat will direct itself to the destination. It still has a little bit of work to do as far as getting it to a completion point, but we've done a significant amount of work towards that goal in mind.